Let's start. The threats are: knight takes pawn, knight takes pawn, check. Pawn takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. Queen takes bishop. The checks are: knight to c7, check. Knight takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn, check. The answer is: pawn takes knight. Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. One more. Threats in puzzle position are: queen takes rook, check. Queen takes knight, check. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes bishop. Let us look at checks in puzzle position. Queen to g7, check. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes knight, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Answer to this puzzle is: queen takes rook, check. King takes queen. Knight to e7, check. King to f8. Knight takes queen. Next, here are threats in puzzle position. Rook takes pawn, check. Here are checks in puzzle position. Rook takes pawn, check. The puzzle is solved using f6. King to g8. Rook takes pawn, check. King to f8. g4. h5. g5. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: queen takes knight, check. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. The checks are: queen takes knight, check. Queen to f5, check. Queen to e6, check. Queen to d7, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is: queen to e6, check. King to d8. Queen takes bishop. One more. The threats are: queen takes rook. Queen takes knight. Queen takes pawn. Pawn takes queen. Rook takes pawn. Rook takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The answer is: pawn takes queen. Knight takes bishop, check. Pawn takes knight. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: knight takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Checks in this position are: knight to f8, check. Knight to f4, check. Pawn takes pawn, check. h5, check. Queen takes pawn, check. The answer is: h5, check. King to h7. Knight to g5, check. Next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Bishop takes queen. Rook takes knight. There are no checks in this position. The answer is: bishop takes queen. Bishop takes bishop. Rook takes knight. One more. Here are threats in puzzle position. Knight takes pawn. Bishop takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes bishop, check. Here are checks in puzzle position. Knight to g2, check. Knight takes bishop, check. The puzzle is solved using: knight takes bishop, check. Queen takes knight. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes knight. Bishop takes knight. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes knight. Queen takes bishop. Knight takes bishop. Rook takes bishop. Checks in puzzle position are: queen to b8, check. Queen to e8, check. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Knight takes bishop. Knight takes knight. Queen takes knight. Bishop to d4, check. Rook takes bishop. One more. Threats in this position are: there are no threats in this position. The checks are: rook to d8, check. Answer to this puzzle is: before. Rook to d5. Rook takes rook. Pawn takes rook. b5. Another puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: there are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. Answer to this puzzle is: king to d7. King to g1. King takes knight. One more. Here are the threats. Rook takes pawn. Here are the checks. Rook to f5, check. Solution to the puzzle is: rook to f5, check. King to d6. Rook takes bishop. Rook to e7, check. King to a6. Rook takes pawn, check. King to b5. Let's continue. The threats are: rook takes knight. Queen takes knight. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes bishop. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using: knight takes bishop. Pawn takes knight. Rook to e8. Next, here are the threats. Rook takes bishop. Queen takes rook, check. Queen takes pawn. The checks are: queen takes rook, check. Answer to this puzzle is rook to g8. Bishop takes pawn, check. Rook takes bishop. Queen takes rook. Rook takes rook. One more. Threats in this position are: knight takes pawn. Rook takes rook. Checks in puzzle position are: rook to e5, check. Knight to h7, check. Knight to e4, check. Rook to h5, check. Rook to g6, check. The best move in puzzle position is knight to e4, check. King to f4. Rook takes queen. Rook takes rook. Knight takes rook. One more. Here are the threats. Bishop takes pawn. Queen takes bishop. Knight takes knight. Knight takes knight. There are no checks in this position. Here is the solution to the puzzle. Knight takes knight. Bishop takes queen. Knight takes queen. Bishop to c7. Knight takes pawn. Next puzzle, the threats are: pawn takes pawn. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is knight to e8. Queen to b6, check. King to h1. One more. Here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn, check. Here are checks in puzzle position. Queen to a8, check. Queen to c8, check. Queen to e8, check. Queen to e6, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Answer to this puzzle is queen takes pawn, check. King to h7. Rook to c8. e3. Queen to g8, check. King to g6. Rook to c6, check. Let us go to the next puzzle. Threats in puzzle position are: queen takes bishop, check. Queen takes bishop, check. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes pawn. Bishop takes queen. Checks in this position are: queen takes bishop, check. Queen takes bishop, check. Queen to h7, check. Solution to the puzzle is: queen takes bishop, check. King takes queen. Bishop takes queen. Let us go to the next puzzle. Puzzle position vulnerabilities are: rook takes bishop. Knight takes pawn. Knight takes pawn. Here are the checks. Queen to h3, check. Knight to f4, check. Knight to e1, check. The puzzle is solved using: rook to a8. Queen to b6. Rook to a6. Queen takes pawn. Queen takes queen. Knight takes queen. d4, check. f3. Pawn takes bishop. Let's see the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is: king to g3. Bishop to f7. King to h3. Queen takes rook. Knight takes queen. Next puzzle, let us look at threats in puzzle position. Rook takes pawn, check. Rook takes pawn. The checks are: rook takes pawn, check. Solution to the puzzle is: rook takes pawn, check. King to g8. Queen to h4. King to f7. Rook to h8. Rook takes pawn. Queen takes rook. Queen takes queen. Rook takes queen. Next puzzle, here are threats in puzzle position. Queen takes pawn, check. Knight takes pawn. Checks in this position are: queen to a8, check. Queen to b8, check. Queen takes pawn, check. Answer to this puzzle is: queen to a8, check. King to c7. Queen to a5, check. Another puzzle. Here are the threats. Rook takes rook. There are no checks in this position. The best move in puzzle position is: rook takes rook. Pawn takes rook. King to f6. King to c3. King to e5. Let us go to the next puzzle. Here are threats in puzzle position. There are no threats in this position. There are no checks in this position. The puzzle is solved using: knight to e6. King to b4. Knight takes pawn. Bishop to b5. Knight to h3. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.